Okay, the question is, was Ron Dennis as meticulous as he appears to be, and how was working with the McLaren team, and did I have a favorite car? In regards to Ron being meticulous, Ron was very, I guess I would use the word demanding as far as quality and meeting the requirements, and that was good. We were good with that. Uh, and we enjoyed working with Ron. Ron, even though he was uh, insistent on the quality that's required for Formula One racing, he also was a neat guy to be around. I enjoyed his company very much. And that went for the whole team. John Barnard, also, I enjoyed working with him. And he was every bit as exacting as Ron as far as his requirements were concerned. So that from that point of view, I think they made a great team. I did not really have a favorite McLaren car. We just enjoyed being a part of the team and the operation, and enjoyed very much our relationship with McLaren.
Thanks for posting. What was uniquely challenging about designing and manufacturing the Formula One chassis versus aerospace chassis?
Actually, the technology is very similar. Uh, they both required hand layup and precision in the whole process. Of course, we made spacecraft structures, and those kind of things, and you can imagine that had exacting requirements. Uh, the McLaren chassis, I guess maybe the unique thing there was that the McLaren chassis was a honeycomb structure with skins on both sides of a honeycomb structure. And we had not made a lot of those, but we were confident that we could take the technology and get it to apply directly to the McLaren chassis. So there wasn't any particularly challenging problems from our point of view, except to we knew that we had to be precise in the things that we did to satisfy Ron and John Barnard.
Do you have any favorite stories on interactions with the drivers?
Well, I guess one of my favorite stories is when John Watson crashed the the car and walked away from it. Well, first of all, uh, I think that the result of that crash pretty much put away the fear that the composite chassis would blow up in a cloud of dust in a crash. To be honest, we didn't know what would really happen, but we felt we should be okay. Uh, anyway, John crashed in the wall, tore off the engine, and you're probably familiar with a lot of things that happened there. But when we had this discussion with John, John described that he thought he was going to get very badly hurt in the crash, if not killed, because he was going pretty fast. And he walked away, and he said, walking away from that crash with no injuries was very reassuring. Then, well, I guess that's one story. And there's a lot of stories of Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda really liked the chassis. In fact, he made the statement that it was the stiffest, strongest, safest chassis in Formula One, and he said, "Therefore, I drive."
What did you think of the motor racing world at the time? How closely connected was it to the aerospace industry? I can only imagine that it must have been strange to have been approached by a motor racing team about this kind of tech. Was it a big surprise, or were you expecting someone to come knocking sooner or later?
Well, we had other teams other than McLaren, approach us as far as building composite parts for their cars, and the problem was is that they they generally wanted it to be done gratis, just for advertising purposes and that kind of thing, and we could not do that. When McLaren came, the it, Ron Ron called me. I got this phone call from Ron Dennis, and he explained who he was and what he wanted done, and I said, well, Ron, we really can't make cars parts for nothing. And Ron said, oh, we're quite prepared to pay. Well, for us, that eliminated a big obstacle right off the bat, so we were interested from that point. And we had other questions, of course, like liability and these kind of things. And we did not know how it would perform in a crash. We hoped it and thought it would be good, but we had no data to say that. And McLaren realized that, and they were interested in talking to us. So a couple of days later, Ron Dennis and John Barnard showed up.
How did this project come together? Was it McLaren's whole idea and only needed help from you to realize the project, or were you more involved in that?
Okay, the chassis design, the desire to make a carbon fiber chassis was McLaren's idea. It was John Barnard's baby. John Barnard came up with the idea, and Ron supported him in that idea, totally supported him on it. We did not have to make any new technology advances or that kind of thing. We had the overall composite structures technology. What we had to do then was apply that to the McLaren job. And McLaren, when they came over to visit us, they brought a model with them and described what they were looking for. And we told them that we thought we could do it and we'd like to have a shot at it. But we did suggest that they make it in one piece rather than two halves bonded together. And McLaren, they like that idea. And I think with our technology we had in removable mandrel systems, we were able, with McLaren, to come up with a removable mandrel design, which, by the way, McLaren made those mandrels and shipped them to us. So it was a joint effort, but it worked out really, really quite well, I think, for McLaren and us.
How was it to work with Niki Lauda? Did he take more interest in the chassis than most of the drivers?
The short answer to that is yes. Niki, not only was he an outstanding driver, he also had a great technical mind. Niki could get in a car and take a couple laps and tell you what's wrong with the car. And I think the team always appreciated Niki's insights and feel for technology. In regard to the composite chassis, Niki definitely took a strong interest in it. He believed it was the stiffest, strongest, safest chassis out there, and on one occasion at least he made the statement that this is the strongest, stiffest, safest chassis, therefore I drive.
Thank you for doing this AMA, Bob. Who do you feel were the biggest driving forces behind the carbon fiber monocoque concept? Ron Dennis or John Barnard?
Okay, the idea of the carbon fiber chassis was definitely John Barnard's, and he approached Ron Dennis with the idea, and Ron Dennis supported him 100%. So it was John's idea, but Ron supported it to the extent that I think John was very encouraged to move forward with the whole idea. Anyway, they came to us sort of out of the blue and wanted to know if we would be interested in building the chassis. The basic idea was theirs, and what we did was apply our technology to help McLaren make it happen.
Okay, this is a three-part question. Did your involvement in Formula 1 ever disprove a concept that you thought was going to work? If so, what?
we thought the concept would work the first time that McLaren brought it to us. We worked some details out together, but the idea was McLaren's, and we at Hercules felt it would work from the start. The only question we had was what happens in a crash. We just didn't know the answer to that.
And what was the most surprising, interesting discovery from a technological side in Formula One?
I think unfortunately, we had to learn through a crash, but we did not know how it would perform in a crash. It turns out it performed even better than we expected. And so I guess that's what we learned. We learned that composite structures, not only are they strong and stiff, but they also, being made out of various fibers, can withstand an impact load quite well.
And then, how did you adapt your corporate practices and standards for competition in Formula One?
We didn't change anything. We had, of course, had a lot of experience in the exacting requirements for space structures and certainly aircraft structures as well. So what we really did was apply the technology that we had to the Formula One race car, and with help from McLaren. There were attachment issues that we had not tested as well, and like how do you attach the engine to the chassis, and with McLaren we were able to work out those kind of details. But as far as the overall technology is concerned, we didn't change anything.
What were the initial reactions of the drivers transitioning from an aluminum build to a composite?
Okay, I think in general the drivers, when they got in the very stiff chassis, the carbon fiber chassis, they felt that the car handled very well. They liked the way it handled. I know that Niki Lauda in particular said that he had no worries when he went out to test drive a car. Had no worries with the chassis. All the chassis problems were eliminated. So all he had to look for was other issues, not the chassis.
What is your opinion on the newer hyper-engineered aero elements on chassis? What's it like watching the tech today, knowing that you were the pushing the envelope that got us there?
Okay, in actuality, McLaren were the ones pushing the envelope. It was John Barnard's idea, supported strongly by Ron Dennis. All we did was apply our technology to their requirements. So they were the ones pushing the envelope.
Were there any specific drivers that went above and beyond just driving? A driver that would stay longer with the engineers, spend more time trying to understand the car from an engineering side?
Okay, the answer to that question is Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda was a driver, and he was also had a great technical mind, and so he wanted to know details. So it was great working with and knowing Niki.
Why was aluminum honeycomb placed between carbon skins? Were alternative materials like Kevlar honeycomb or balsa wood considered? And how long did the McLaren-Hercules partnership last? At one point, surely McLaren started building monocoques on their own.
Okay, first part of that question, only aluminum honeycomb was considered. Other structures could possibly have been employed, but aluminum honeycomb, for us anyway, appeared to be the clear choice. As far as how long our relationship with McLaren existed, I guess I would say something in the order of 10 years. I don't know exact number on this. Something in the order of 10 years, and McLaren started building chassis at their facility. They bought an autoclave and so basically our technology for building a chassis was transferred to McLaren, and it was a great relationship, and just a great relationship. I really enjoyed working with those guys.
Having recently read John Barnard's book, I'm really happy that you are doing this AMA. Thank you. How aware were you of how much impact it would have on motorsports at the time? Did you think it would succeed when you were first approached, or were you a little skeptical? Would love to hear the story of how it came to be from your side.
Okay, from a structural point of view, we were all totally convinced that it would do the job. We did not know how it would behave under a crash, as we've said on several occasions. Turned out it performed much better it turned out it performed better than we expected. I'll put it that way. As far as how it was going to impact the motorsports world, I guess I didn't have the insight personally to see how revolutionary it would really be. John Barnard and Ron Dennis understood that, and we were just happy to be a part of the team, although we feel like we definitely contributed, but the overall impact and the foresight was definitely McLaren's. Okay, I'd just like to thank you all for the questions, and I hope that my answers were helpful to you, and so all I can say at this point is Godspeed.